that the older generation is the haves and the younger generation is the have-nots, because now they're playing, it's called late stage capital at the end of the day, right? So capitalism is now at a late stage where everybody has already owned all the pieces of the board, monopoly. And now you're entering the game short stacked.
Okay.
Look, I get it. The Toronto real estate market is confusing. Whether you're a new or experienced investor or just looking for a home to raise your family in, join us at Broadview Table Talks as we sit around the table with my friends and talk about the real estate and the ever-changing market in Toronto.
Okay, we are live and ready. Let's talk numbers today in today's Broadview Table Talks. Today is another edition of Welcome to Messy Desk. No, I mean, our office is kind of messy.
Our desk gets messier and messier every time, and it's kind of funny.
It's so bad. I feel bad. There's like, if you can actually see, there's actually a lot of stuff here. All right, so let's look at some of the market stats in April 2024. The numbers just came out not too long ago. And looking at the Greater Golden Horseshoe, there's 10,000 sales, which is actually down 1.7% year over year. What does it look like in the GTA? Not including Hamilton.
In GTA, the sales are down a little bit from last year, but it's at around 7,114 sales.
Okay, so how much down? 5%?
5% from last year.
5%. To me, what's concerning is the actual number of new listings. We're seeing a lot of spike in new listing inventory in the Greater Golden Horseshoe, which includes Hamilton, Greater Hamilton, Golden Horseshoe. That's a new thing. It includes Hamilton now. Anyway, we're up by 40%, another additional 38.2%, 23,000 new listings onto the market.
Wow. 47% in the GTA.
Ooh, that's a lot.
That's quite a bit.
So
16,941 from 11,000.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
The reason why I think that's an issue is because obviously a number I look at is the sales to new listings ratio. Mm-hmm. And how do you calculate that again? Remind the audience.
Well, you just get your sales divided by, right?
The new listings, right? And what does that tell you?
I mean, it kind of just tells us that we're not really selling enough. we're kind of heading into like a buyer's market type situation.
So as you know, demand and supply, that's really what it is, right? So the demand, if you count that as sales, is flat to like maybe down by negative 5% in the GTA. Yeah. Whereas new listings, which is the new supply onto the market, is actually increasing by about 40, 45, 47%, 48%, so it says. Yeah, 48%. So it means there's way more supply than there is demand, right? Or it's shrinking a little bit. So that's going to be a problem. And if you look at the sales to new listings ratio, in all of the GTA, it was 42%. But what's concerning to me is the downtown Toronto condo market, where that's closer to 30%. Just means that for the amount of sales that are happening in the last month, there's more supply coming onto the market. And the reason why I think this is the case is because the cost to carry places is just so expensive now because of mortgage rates. You know, at the beginning of the rate hiking cycle, it wasn't that bad. You know, people were just kind of waiting it out, thinking that this won't last forever, and it just got delayed and delayed and delayed. And then always we had that, whole rhetoric of higher for longer. Interest rates being higher for longer. And of course that causes a problem for rentals if you're a landlord, because the cost of your financing plus the cost of the maintenance fees, taxes.
The rent just doesn't cover it.
It just doesn't cover it. And it doesn't even cover the interest portion alone. Yeah. Forget about the principal portion. So I'm often finding a lot of landlords having to either kick in more money to make the cash flow like neutral, I guess, or pay out to make the mortgage. So you're kicking in like $1,000 on average, depending on what size of the unit, or they're putting a lump sum down to pay it down, right? Pay down the mortgage, so using less leverage, which is by design, right? Like the Bank of Canada wanted us to spend less money on everything else because we're paying more in debt servicing costs, whether it's debt servicing your credit cards or line of credits or car payments or housing mortgage payments or even rental mortgage payments. So it's by design.
I understand. America was built on credit.
It was.
Jay-Z said that.
Really? He actually said that? That's awesome. And, the reason why it used to work for the past 2 decades is because the debt servicing or the credit cost was actually lower than the cost of inflation. Mm-hmm. So just by holding it, if you make sense, if you hold an asset that's leveraged and the cost to carry that asset or that debt was like, call it 3%, but yet it was going up by 7-8% per year, you're just winning that spread automatically for the past 2 decades. That's how people like me won.
It's made sense before, yeah.
Right.
But then they carry that into today, and it no longer works the same.
Doesn't work. Well,
it still has the same idea, but it doesn't work the same. The numbers aren't making sense anymore.
You got to be more scrutiny. Like you have to put a lot more scrutiny into your investments now, right? Because it doesn't work on just that basic fundamental of just buying anything, buying any asset. So basically, in the past, people that were saving money lost out due to inflation. If things are going up at 7, 8, 10% per year, 4% even, whatever it is, right? You're just basically losing by that much because your money gets diluted by that much. So if you're saving, that was bad, right? Whereas people that got into debt were winning because if you're getting to debt to buy assets, then you're winning. But if you're getting debt to buy stupid things, then that's stupid, right? Like, vacations and things that don't appreciate. But if you're buying things that appreciate, they're appreciating faster than the cost of debt. Whereas that is now no longer the case. So you have to be smarter in what you're investing in. You got to buy things that have upside in terms of, you can add value to it by including extra bedrooms or larger, more square footage that you can rent out for more. And you're using debt to, add another floor maybe, or taking one of these houses and turn it into a triplex or fourplex or even fiveplex, 4+1 with a garden suite and then laneway suites, right? Because you're adding value.
Yeah.
And that debt is just temporary until you can actually increase the revenue so that it exceeds the amount of carrying cost.
But essentially the reason why that's so difficult is just because that's a lot of leverage. Like that's a lot of money that, a lot of people don't actually have up front.
Yeah. They don't have that money. And if they're borrowing it, they can't qualify because of debt servicing payments. The banks say, no, you can't qualify that for that anymore. So it's become an issue. So then what do? I guess you get strategic and you try to get investors involved, whether it's a sibling, a family member, a spouse, and you do it together and you have the power of 2 or more people, power investors, to actually get that same asset, which was previously not affordable for people. Right. So that's where we're at today. And it's not going to be like this again forever. Hopefully it won't be like this. Well, I shouldn't say hopefully, because there's a lot of people that sit on the sidelines that are like angry. All the millennials are angry. So maybe it never will get back to that. But if it ever does get back to that, because a lot of people that do have those assets are depending on those, the rates come back down. We'll see what happens, right?
I mean, normally, like if you're thinking about it in an economic sense or basic economics, I don't think nobody can see this if you're listening, but on camera, doesn't the graph always end up going like up and down? So this is just a low right now.
For what?
For just in
sales price or
terms
number of sales.
The number of sales.
Okay, well, I guess I can bring this up on camera later, or maybe I won't because it's too much editing. But the number of sales, it actually is, since December 23, actually shot up quite a bit. So, and that's mostly due to seasonal factors, right? If you look at month over month, from December 2023, it was 3,400 sales. January went to 4,100, and slowly increased to about 7,000 sales in the GTA, all of GTA, right? Okay. So we see over there, 7,000 sales, yeah. And if you're looking from was that April? That was 7,487. So down by 5%. Right. So what was your question?
Well, I was just seeing like the ebbs and flows when you're saying like, I hope we're not like this forever. Like we shouldn't be, right?
I meant interest rates.
Oh, I see.
I meant interest rates being lower than the pace of inflation because then asset owners win. But if it's not that way and if it's the other way, and now you have it's called a negative interest rate.
Right.
A real negative interest rate. Whereas if it's the other way around and interest rates are higher than the rate of inflation or cap rates even for that matter, whatever you want to use for the terminology, whatever number you're looking at, then investment becomes challenging. And that becomes a problem on its own because that means we won't have more rental units for people to rent because not everybody can afford to buy or wants to buy and they want to rent, which boosts up the rental market, which then boosts up inflation, which then boosts up the need for bringing in higher interest rates.
It's a whole train of things.
It's a whole thing. Like it's not like one way. It's not one solution to fix everything.
Yeah.
There's so many different levers and they're all interconnected, right? So there's no real problem. It's just that I feel like the way that the current federal government, anyway, they're doing it is just they're failing the majority of people because there's only like a small subset of people that are winning right now, and these are the super high, ultra net worth people that have like billions, right, or hundreds of millions of dollars.
Right.
But the average everyday person, the middle class and even the low class people, they're not winning right now.
They're the ones that's affected the most, for sure.
Yeah, essentially, yeah, because the lower income people don't have assets, and the middle class do have assets, but they're also getting killed too, right? So at some point, I think it'll turn around. Hopefully, it will turn around where the interest rates are lower than the cost of borrowing, than the asset price, and if it's the other way around, like I just see, I mean, a lot of things failing, right? Like businesses are laying people off because nobody has money to spend anymore because the interest rates are so high, because they're not spending on the goods and services in the economy that make the economy move, which means companies that hire employees because they're, you know, they have revenue from sales, now they don't have revenue to hire people anymore, right? Which is going to cause a whole run-on effect on people losing their jobs and recessions and economies crashing, right? Higher unemployment numbers. And if they don't lower interest rates, that's what's going to happen. And then, like, what about all these things that have write-downs on commercial values, to say office buildings and other commercial real estate that depends on interest rates to make the numbers work and for the valuations. So if that all goes down, sorry, I'm talking a little too technical, but if those values go down, basically the banks that lend their money on this debt. So don't forget, like, for every asset, somebody is holding that debt, right? Yeah. So if you're invested into a bank somehow and so that debt, and that debt's not worth what they lent it on, they're basically taking a loss. And if they're taking a loss, what's that going to do to somebody's investment?
It's going down.
It's going down, right? So it's going to crash the economy. So I don't think overall the government can allow that to happen. At least the bank won't allow that to happen, I don't think. Right. So, but ultimately the Bank of Canada isn't there to worry about people's investments. They're there to worry about the rate of inflation, really, mainly, and the economy in general and productivity. That's what they're there for.
Okay. So there's just one thing I wanted to go back on, speaking about the stats that just came out recently for April.
Yeah.
And going back to what we were talking about with the new listings, how, I know this is almost like a lagging indicator, but how is this going to affect the market in the next coming months? Just because, I mean, I look at this and I read it all the time and I see, like, why is Toronto still so expensive? Why isn't the sale price moving?
Well,
like, all the prices, no matter what it looks like. So it looks like it's turning into a buyer's market, right? By the amount of new listings that are coming in and the amount of listings that are staying on the market.
That's actually a very good question. So it's not like a buyer's market where all of a sudden the tables have turned and it's like Bitcoin, where it's like, oh, the entry price is perfect, I can go in now, right? It's not going to be affordable. Like, that's like the ugly truth that's actually out there.
Right.
In order to make it affordable, prices have to drop by like half, which I don't know any government that will, like, who's in power, they will be so unpopular. It won't happen. So many other parts of the economy will fail if asset values drop in half or more, right? So based on the current levels of income that are average incomes, unless you have doubled your salary or whatever, right? Like, the average income doubles, there's no way that it can be affordable until property values drop by more than half or more, really.
I see.
So it's not going to happen.
I was having shower thoughts one day. So then I was like, is Toronto stubborn? It's like, because everybody grows up with the idea that your house is the most valuable asset that you have, right? So they don't want to sell it. Obviously, they don't want to sell it at a loss. Obviously, they don't want to sell it at all. They want to hold it. Is that why? And I'm thinking, I'm like, mentally, is that why some prices aren't changing? Because they refuse to just let it drop.
Absolutely.
Right?
Especially the larger, when it comes to like these average prices, it's kind of hard to actually use as a good metric, because when times are rough, the people with unless they really have to sell, but the majority of people with higher price points of houses most likely have the financial means, like majority of them will have the financial means to hold and not sell. So you won't see that's why if you scroll in the Market Watch down a little bit, you'll see the sales by house price, by housing price, right? Like the second page there, right there. Right? You'll see the sales by price point.
Okay, yeah.
And at the higher price points, those aren't moving because they're not selling, like as more than before. Like, and this doesn't show you history. It doesn't show you like a graph of the previous months, and you can see like how it relates to say February or December or like August or whatever, right? It only looks at a snapshot of what happened in April. So unless you compile those numbers and you look at it, or you do some deeper analysis, I bet you that the higher price points, there's less and less transactions, because first of all, the cost of carrying is too high. So on the buyer side, it's too expensive to buy. But on the seller side, they don't want to sell because they don't want to take a 10%, 15% haircut.
Yeah.
Right? So in order for it to be affordable by CMHC standards, it has to drop by 50% or more. I forgot the exact amount, but it's something like 50%. Which is not going to happen. There's just too many things that are happening. So what can you do in response to that? Well, first of all, you can partner up with somebody to invest.
Yeah.
Make a mom and dad can help you out, right? Well, you guys have a lot of kids in your family, so maybe not.
But
But
they're spread thin.
you know, at the end of the day, like you got to think of it this way: that generation, they kind of hit the jackpot by owning assets because your parents were smart enough to buy something or lucky enough to buy something.
Yeah.
So if their money went up, like their retirement income went up X amount of dollars, they're gonna have to kind of take that back down and give it back to the kids to help them out, right? It's kind of like a dilemma. But essentially, you can get help from bank of mom and dad. You can get help from, you know, partnering up with your partner, right? Or maybe if it's just even two of you isn't enough to buy something, maybe you have another couple or another person that wants to invest as well too, right? Or maybe you get a house and you kind of co-live with somebody. Like I think that's going to be a new trend. And that's why the whole, you know, zoning laws of allowing for up to 4 units as of right without having to rezone your property, as long as it meets building code and fire code, then what happens if you bought with like really good friends of yours, of the two of you, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe a sibling, like maybe, you know, your partner's, does she have sisters, brothers?
No, she has a brother, but
yeah, that won't happen, right? But like even somebody like, the reason why I say siblings is because generally you're not going to fight with your brothers, sisters as much. Generally. Or there's blood ties there. It's a little easier than just a partnership.
Yeah.
Where who knows what'll happen, right? But like joint ownership is definitely a thing.
Yeah, and I've seen it become more of a trend, especially last year. Last year, I've seen. You saw it all too. All the articles came out with families, just two families, like buying a place together.
Right.
Yeah.
And even generations, even within generations, like if you bought something with your parents, for example, or your, you know, and then there's also like there's actually a legal structure that allows you to do this. So the main thing is either tenants in commons or joint tenancy, right? So joint tenancy means that if somebody, knocks on wood, if they die, then the remaining amount goes to that joint tenancy, right? It goes to the rest of the people. Whereas tenant in common, if that other person dies, then that amount that they own, their shares, will go to the estate. And the estate takes over. And whoever owns the estate, or whoever the estate goes to, like maybe kids that passes on to, or whoever might go to, maybe it goes to charity if they have a will to do so, then that portion of it goes to charity. So that means you can swap out you remember this from your courses, right?
Yeah.
Tenants in commons, you can swap out the shares to somebody else, basically. Whereas joint tenancy, it automatically has a right of survivorship. It goes to the next person. So there's already a structure for that, right? So say you have a single title, a single house that you cut up into 2 houses. Actually, there's one in Mortimer right now that's on sale that has, you know, you could, like they split up into 4 units and they kind of, actually no, that one they condoize, they turn it into a condo. So it's condo ownership. So you can actually sell the shares easily. Tenants in common isn't as easy to do that because you have to get the person to agree to it. And also mortgage qualification kind of gets really nasty, whereas condo actually has individual title. I know I'm getting into too much detail for regular people to listen to, but just know that there's an ownership structure that allows you to kind of do this, right? Swapping people in and out of the shares.
Yeah. So basically, I mean, whatever the situation that you have to move, like there are ways for you to enter the market.
Yeah. So essentially, in order to make it affordable, prices have to come down by half, or you can basically double your purchasing power by joining up with other purchasers, right?
Yeah, and it's funny. So I was actually, when you released that video yesterday, and I was actually talking to Britt about this yesterday because she was like, "Why is Toronto so expensive compared to every other major city?" Let's not talk about like the New Yorks or the Vancouvers, because that one is also the same level as us. But the other major cities like Chicago's or whatever, like why is their price point so much lower than our price point? How did we get here in the first place? And you kind of answer that a little bit in your video.
It's because of jobs.
Yeah.
I didn't answer. I don't know which video you're talking about, but it's because of jobs. That's why they're expensive. If you move to some small little island somewhere or some small town somewhere, there's no jobs. What do you do for income?
Well, what about a major city like Chicago, right?
There's
like
jobs
Chicago, there. Like their average house point, and we were looking at it yesterday. This is all in USD though. It's like $400K.
Oh, you're saying their price points?
Yeah.
No, there's some parts of Chicago that are really expensive too.
Yeah,
it just
definitely.
depends where. If you go just outside of that, so it's kind of like saying in Toronto, right?
Yeah.
Toronto downtown core is super expensive for most people.
But Ontario is expensive. Like in
no,
general.
you can go to Mississauga for cheaper, or like I'm not knocking on Mississauga, but you can go for much cheaper there, or you can go to like Kitchener-Waterloo, or you can go to like Minden, right? Or like Britt's Cottages. You know what I mean?
Minden is.
Yeah, or not Minden, where she's from. Anyway, I'm just saying that there's cheaper parts of Ontario for that matter, and it still is relatively expensive.
Yeah,
but there are pretty affordable places within it, and it's like saying Chicago to outer Chicago. Like I don't really know Chicago that well, but I know some people that work in Chicago in real estate, and I know just outside like 45. And when I was there, like 45 minutes outside of that it was pretty expensive, pretty affordable. And relative to downtown Toronto, if you go 45 minutes outside of that, it's called Durham, Pickering, Ajax. There's still places out there that you can get like what compared to what we're used to.
I
right?
see.
It doesn't fall off as much, but that's also because our population is higher.
Yeah.
Right. So again, remember, it comes down to supply and demand. If the demand's there because there's more population, the price is going to go higher.
Because in your video, you were talking about why is Toronto so unaffordable? You started off with the $5 million houses, and you said, how did it all start? It all started here, and then you went to a condo. Like, what was that about?
Oh, okay. So what I meant for that whole video was about climbing the property ladder.
Right.
It's real life monopoly. Right?
Okay.
You start off walking the boardwalk, and you're renting at first, right? Because somebody else owned it. But if it's a clean slate and everybody start from scratch, and you land on the house, you're going to snap up that real estate and buy that real estate. So you start with a $200 house, or whatever it is, $86 house.
Oh, okay. So
which is a condo, really.
So it goes back to exactly what you were saying with like the people 20 years ago were lucky or were fortunate enough to be able to snatch up whatever was here.
And that's why this generation is so mad about boomers versus millennials. And that's why this whole budget came with this fairness for every generation, because they're saying the boomers made all this money because they snatched up the land while it's cheap. But they don't realize that it was that current government that messed up the inflation in order to make prices. Anyway, whatever. I'm not going to get into politics. But they're saying that the older generation is the haves and the younger generation is the have-nots. Because now they're playing, it's called late stage capital at the end of the day, right? So capitalism is now at a late stage where everybody has already owned all the pieces of the board of Monopoly. And now you're entering the game short stacked.
Okay, that makes sense.
But anyway, if there's a way for you to get into the property ladder, because right now, the sales to new listings, it's a buyer's market, in other words. If you have means to do it, not saying it's completely affordable because it hasn't dropped by half yet, but the values have dropped by, at the peak, 15, 20%, maybe, let's call it. If you can get in now.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying like it's not financial advice for everybody. I'm not saying like today's the point where you have to get in. I'm saying like around this time. If you have the means to do so, I think it's a good time to buy, because clearly the market says it's a buyer's market based on the sales to new listings ratio, based on months of inventory as well too. I think we're at a 3 or 4 months of inventory for condos in downtown Toronto. It's the entry point.
And it's springtime.
And it's springtime too, and it shouldn't be like this, right? So months of inventory, I have it here. We're looking at last month, I think it was like overall, and just the way, while it was loading up, to calculate that, you look at the number of active listings. So what they do is they take the number of active listings at the end of that month. Yeah. So end of April, there was how many new active listings? There was 18,000 active listings, which is actually up by same time last month. Last April 2023, it was 10,000. So up by 75%, 74%.
That's so much.
That's a lot. That means there's a lot of sitting inventory.
Yeah.
And if you look at the months of inventory now, you divide that by the number of sales. So the theory is that if we had the same number of sales that happened in April last month, and at the end of April there was 18,000 sales. Sorry, I'm saying this again. 18,000 active listings, but only 7,000 sales. You divide the two numbers. You divide the active listings by the number of sales. That means it would take 2.6 months at that pace of sales to sell all the inventory that's remaining. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's kind of very theoretical, and it doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't mean actually it's going to take 2.6 months on average to sell everything. Actually, in fact, there's an average property days on market and average listing days on market. So what's to do to numbers? Do you know?
No.
Average property days on market is the ones where they cancel and relist. They look at the same addresses, and it was canceled and listed again. How many times they combine that all together? So on average, I look at property days on market. It's a little more accurate. Sometimes you get that number wrong. That's probably why they still keep the listing days on market. I'm not sure. But the average property days on market is 28 days versus this time last year was 24 days. So it went up by 16%. Average listing days on market was 19 from 17, which is up by 11%. Anyway, let's use a more accurate one. In my opinion, it's up by 17%. So it's taking 17% longer to do it, to sell a house.
But then you were also saying that some of that inventory might take 2.5 months for all of it to kind of
2.6 months to clear out. So that's not actually a real number. But if you kind of look at it, it's kind of like those body fat scales, right? Like it's not really accurate. But if you're using the same machine and you're looking at it like from, a time from like last week or last month or whatever it was, then you kind of see a progression, because relative to each other, it is kind of somewhat accurate, right? As accurate as it can be anyway. So if you're looking at the average months of inventory, you're looking at 2.6 months. It doesn't mean it's going to take 2.6 months to sell a home. It just means that it's just a metric.
Right.
A theoretical metric. Now, if you look at last April, that months of inventory number was at 2.3 months. But then if you remember back in 2022, during the pandemic, when rates were super low, that months of inventory was under 1 at 9 months. So that means if it's under 1, it means it's a super hot, blazing hot market.
Yeah,
it means
are snatching it up as it's listed.
Well, yeah, I mean, theoretically, within that month, there's the amount of sales is more than whatever standing inventory is there. So if at the end of the month, there's 10,000 remaining units, but you're selling 11,000, 12,000 for that month, it means it's a super hot market.
Which is why everything in the suburbs also was just like got snatched up or like
it was crazy.
It
was crazy
way
back
over.
then. Yeah, 0.9%.
Okay.
0.9 months, I should say.
Yeah.
So months of inventory is a little bit harder to comprehend if you actually try to break down to see what that is. But it is a useful metric just to see what's active inventory. Sales to new listings ratio is pretty easy to understand because it's just like a percentage, right? If it's below 50%, it's a buyer's market. If it's above 60%, 50%, sorry, it's a seller's market. I kind of give a range just personally based on experience, about plus or minus 10%. So anything below 40% is like a strong buyer's market. Anything above 60% is a strong seller's market.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right?
Yeah.
So in April 2022, when things were high, it was 67% as a sales to new listings ratio. And at the peak, 2021, it was at 72%. Ooh. That means there's not enough new inventory replenishing the amount of sales that were happening, right? Whereas now we're at 43%, 42%, something like that on average. So there you go. If you have any questions, any more questions?
No,
any more
that's
thoughts?
all I had. Yeah. So like, I mean, that's the important thing of having a realtor. I mean, I'm not trying to just sell, but all this information is available for everybody, but it's just how that information is displayed or like
digested. Well, the interpreted way of,
interpreted. There you go.
Yeah, I don't think a realtor. I don't think every realtor can interpret this data, and I don't think it matters because all this stuff is all lagging data, like you were saying. This is last month's data.
Yeah,
what's happening is day by day by day, opportunity by opportunity. Not even day by day. It's opportunity by opportunity. Overall, yes, you can get a sense of where it's going if you're zooming out. This is like super macro level, right? Yeah. Like you're zooming out, and you shouldn't make decisions based on this, but it does tell you where the trend is. And I don't look as real estate as like a thing where you're timing. Or you're entering, like, who cares if the average price point right now is 1.156 if you're holding for 25 years?
Yeah.
Right? Because if you bought it at, let's call it 800,000 versus when you could have bought it at 700,000,
Grand scheme of things, it's not going to be that
things
much
are worth,
different.
1.1 right now. Yeah. So, like, you're still made money, right? Like, if you're selling, and if you're never going to sell, or if you're not planning to sell, you should be buying a home for the utilitarian purpose for a home to live in. Or a home to invest in where it grows your equity and you're providing housing for somebody, right? Not a landlord, but a housing provider. Yeah. That's what the term is. Anyway, yeah, so the whole point is that who cares what's happening in the market? It looks at your individual scenario of what you need. Yes, this can help guide you. You know what they always say? They always say that people make decisions based on emotion, but they justify it with logic. This is what the logic is. So if you're looking for a realtor to justify the logic, hey, we're going to help you no matter what. But if it's more so that what should you do in your individual scenario, that's something that we can answer. Book an appointment below in the links below to actually get that appointment and get that advice based on your scenario. And it also helps you. We're here to guide you through. Our main purpose really is to guide you through that one decision that you need to make right now in your specific scenario situation.
That was awesome.
I keep talking forever. So if you have any questions, just shoot them out. And we have our email here below as well, too. Otherwise, I'll catch you next week.
Yeah, and tell us what to talk about next. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Add it up. Thanks for sticking out to the very end. I hope you got some value out of this. Do me a favor, please press like and subscribe. But more than anything, leave me some feedback so we know what to produce for you going forward. Thanks again.